Nothing for us without us. With good reason, we often hear this phrase from patient organizations and their communities. Rare patient organizations and the families they support are the experts. Their knowledge and experiences are the foundation for much important work. Listening to rare disease families is an important first step to understanding their journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Raring to Listen. My name is Patty Fritz, and I'm the head of UCB's U.S. Corporate Affairs. To honor and support families living with rare diseases, I am very proud to be kicking off this podcast series that aims to elevate the voice of the rare community. Families who are managing rare diseases like myasthenia gravis and rare epilepsies like Dravet syndrome have unique challenges that only families who live with these diseases can truly understand. While we will never know what it's like to walk in their shoes, we want to make every effort to listen, learn, grow, and work with their communities to contribute in a meaningful way. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this journey. Now, to get us started, it's my pleasure to turn the podcast over to our guest moderator for today's episode of Raring to Listen.
This is Kelly Fishbein. I'm the Medical Outcomes Liaison for Epilepsy at UCB, and you're listening to UCB's Rare Epilepsy podcast series, Raring to Listen. I'll be your host today as we talk with Tatiana Lopez and Aaron Riollo, who will give a voice to what it means when families living with rare epilepsy, such as those living with Dravet syndrome, find their community. What does that really mean to be in connection and in relationship with others who are walking the same journey as you? How does that impact the family and the overall quality of life? And how can a sense of community even become restorative to families? This is a timely discussion because when we think about the month of September, there are so many awareness days that remind us about the importance of having a community. So September is a great time to think about how finding your community can be a counter narrative to the messages we get about self-reliance and independence that are so prevalent in our culture. This is also a time of year that our children are going back to school. And while this opens up the door to some exciting opportunities and new experiences for children, for parents and caregivers, especially those living with rare epilepsy, this time may also come with many challenges. At UCB, we believe that it all starts with finding your community. So we are super excited to dive into that topic with our amazing guests today, who not only provide a critical support role within the Dravet Foundation, but they are also both mothers to children who have been diagnosed with Dravet. So let me first introduce Tatiana Lopez. She is the Dravet Syndrome Foundation's DE&I coordinator. Tatiana graduated from the University of Central Florida with a bachelor's degree in legal studies and criminal justice. Her career in social work began when she was working with the juvenile justice system. In this role, she focused on identifying resources needed in the education, career, mental health, and general health fields for each youth and their family. After that, she transitioned into community-based social work, and she did that for about 10 years. During that time, Tatiana worked diligently to build relationships with hospitals, schools, courts, community organizations, in order to bridge the gap between those communities, their needs, and improve the communication among all those institutions. So, as you can hear, not only is Tatiana a sought-after expert in building communities, but she became intimately familiar with rare epilepsy in 2019. It was in that year that Tatiana gave birth to a daughter named Eliana. At only 2 months of age, Eliana began to have seizures, and eventually, after genetic testing was done, her daughter was found to have the SCN1A gene mutation and was diagnosed with Dravet. Tatiana, welcome to Raring to Listen. We are very happy to have you here and appreciate you sharing your time with us. And I wanted to tell you how excited I am today to be discussing this with you. So why don't we go ahead and get started with hearing a little bit more about the early part of your Dravet journey.
My daughter Eliana had her first seizure on January 3rd, 2020, a date that I will never forget. She was only 2 months old. When she began having seizures, her seizures did not look typical. So we went to a lot of doctors trying to figure out what these unusual activities were. Coming from a background where we don't have any type of epilepsy in our family, I've never had a friend with epilepsy. Anything I've seen, it was on TV. We were just trying to figure out what was going on. Once she got her diagnosis, I remember sitting at the neurologist's office. Initially, they told us that these unusual movements were muscle spasms and it wasn't a seizure. It was just a baby getting used to her limbs and learning how to move them. Of course, after that diagnosis, things continued to get worse, and these uncontrolled movements began to look more typical of what you would have seen on TV or in a movie, full body, uncontrolled movements. It took about 3 months before we were able to get any medical professionals to tell us that what she had been having were seizures. She was having them daily. I had began recording them, and it wasn't until she had a seizure that lasted over an hour and we were in the ER and she was unresponsive to a lot of the medication they were giving her that they finally said, we need to start getting testing. And at that point, we got our genetic testing and we were told that she had the SCN1A genetic mutation. And then with all of the other symptoms that she was showing, they were pretty sure that she did have Dravet syndrome. It was almost 4 months of fighting for answers and just following your mom gut of knowing there's something wrong. I hear what you're saying. I know you're telling me I shouldn't be worried, but I'm definitely worried. And then that's when I started researching. You're not going to find a pamphlet about it in a neurology office. It's not something common that a friend of a family may know. Most doctors in the ER don't even know what it is. I think many parents spend their time explaining what your child's condition is. And so that is where I found the Dravet Syndrome Foundation. It was the only website that was writing about exactly what my child was going through.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that experience and how you had to fight to get answers. I think there's so many challenges that parents face when they're trying to just get that first diagnosis. And then that now, like you were describing, it opens up a whole new set of questions that you now then face. I can definitely see how that awakened in you a real desire to be in the kind of community that would help your family. I mentioned before that you were the DE&I coordinator for Dravet Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about what that role is and how you're able to support the community as well as get support?
The DEI coordinator, it is a role that the foundation brought in this year. I usually try to start off of just explaining what DEI is because it's not a term that many use. But DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The Dravet Syndrome Foundation has done an amazing job at creating awareness, identifying the tools that are needed for the community, doing the research. But we wanted to make sure that not only are we creating the resources in the space and providing the tools for research so that we can get medications and ultimately find a cure, we wanted to make sure that we're reaching all of our community. So when you think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we wanted to make sure that we are diversified. Are we reaching all of the families regardless of language barriers, regardless of cultural backgrounds? We want to ensure that we are including them. So we're providing resources that are in different languages. We're providing a support group that not only speaks English, but we're now providing support in Spanish. And we're opening the door to have those cultural conversations about epilepsy. Epilepsy and seizures in a lot of cultures is not very widely accepted. It's looked down upon. It's considered a negative sign, depending on what that cultural background or family or how they were raised. And we want people to not be afraid to have that conversation, not be afraid to ask those questions. We realize that the genetic mutation of SCN1A can affect anyone. we realized that epilepsy can affect anyone. It does not identify by race. It doesn't identify by sexual orientation. It's in the body. Anyone can have it. I would have never imagined that coming from a family that has no history, having previous children that were quote unquote normal, fully healthy, that I would be a mom of a Dravet child. So my role is to identify the barriers, open conversation about the barriers, and make sure that we can create a plan as a foundation to overcome those barriers. We want all of our families to feel loved when they join our community. Being a special needs mom, it gets really lonely. When you're in the hospital for days and weeks at a time, it gets lonely. And if we can provide just a little bit of support and let you know that you're not alone and that we see you, we love you, we understand your journey, then that is our goal. I've worked in mental health hospitals. I've worked in the community. I've worked in the criminal justice. I've worked with homeless. I've worked with veterans. So I would like to say that when it comes to addressing the uncomfortable situations and realities that are out there, I feel pretty comfortable doing that. And so that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are reaching all of our families, no matter where they are. We just want to make sure we're reaching everyone.
I love how your background has uniquely positioned you to help us think about how we build not just a community, but an inclusive community, as you were saying, for people living with this disease. And you bring up so many good points. I mean, it's more than just a group of people who happen to have a similar health condition or a gene mutation. It's about changing our culture and our priorities to welcome and embrace those living with Dravet in every aspect and in every way in our society. Just, it's such a great honor to be talking with you, given your background and given what you're doing today.
Thank you.
I think thank you. So let's bring in Erin Rioyo, who will offer a lot to this conversation, as she is the family network liaison. She also volunteers in both the parent ambassador and the social media ambassador programs. Erin and her husband live outside of Seattle, and they are parents to Eloise and Lionel. Erin began fundraising for the Dravet Foundation soon after her son Lionel was diagnosed with Dravet in 2016. And she has been a volunteer for the Parent Ambassador Program for the West region with the Dravet Foundation Family Network since 2017. She helped to bring the event, which is called the Day of Dravet, to Seattle in 2018. And Erin earned her master's in communication sciences and disorders from Western Washington University and is a speech language pathologist who works part-time at a local pediatric therapy clinic. Erin, welcome back to Raring to Listen. We say back because we were honored to have you join us for the inaugural episode of Raring to Listen. And we are so excited that you were able to join us again to discuss this important topic about finding your community.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be back and excited to participate again today.
So, Erin, I would love to hear more about your early Dravet journey, how that led you to the Dravet Foundation, and what your current role is as the Family Network Liaison.
So I heard Tatiana say, I think she said January 3rd was her date, and we all have our dates. And our date was Saturday, May 23rd, 2015. Earlier that day, I actually learned I was pregnant with Eloise, and Lionel was just toddling all around, being your typical little toddler. He was maybe just over 15 months and then screamed out. We thought, boy, it's time for a nap. And he went into a full, what we now call a full tonic-clonic seizure. It looked exactly like it did textbook description, things that you would see in movies. The only thing was it wasn't stopping. And so we quickly called our medics. We transferred to one hospital who couldn't help us. They couldn't get it to stop. And finally, we transferred to another hospital at Seattle Children's. And by that point, it had been going for off and on 2 hours. May 23rd goes down as a day that I thought that I was getting blessed with a new child and losing another. So it's an incredibly imprinted day for us. He did have a fever that day, or by the time the medics arrived, there was a fever. So we were left with, it was probably just a febrile seizure. Let's do an EEG. And the EEG within a couple of weeks revealed some patterns consistent with epilepsy. We were given a rescue medication and a follow-up appointment. And we somehow had 7 to 8 months of seizure freedom. So we really didn't have a need at that time. As a mom, I was wanting answers. Why is this happening? And I was told everybody gets a freebie. If there's not more going on, then we're not going to go looking for answers because we don't necessarily know or want to know what we'll find. So we really had about 7 to 8 months of living what we thought was an epilepsy that he might outgrow. Fast forward to he was about 22 months old. His sister was just born. And 4 days after she was born, he had another seizure. And this one looked different than the first one. 2 weeks after that, had another seizure, looked different than the other two. 2 weeks after that, another seizure. So you see the pattern. We're spending many times transferring to the emergency department, getting told to up medications, add medications. Thankfully, that only lasted about 2 months. And then our neurologist said, let's do an overnight EEG. After that, the next morning, they said, we think we need to do some genetic testing. Rather than cast a huge net of a full epilepsy panel, our neurologist said, we're going to go fishing just for one fish at a time. We're going to go and just test this one gene, SCN1A. And within a couple of weeks, it came back positive. And so in that time, of course, I am Googling, going to Dr. Google, what does SCN1A mean? Came to Dravet syndrome and found it through Dravet Syndrome Foundation. And as soon as I read the description, I knew that's what it was. At the time that I was Googling it, I also found that I was starting to find my voice and sharing it a little more. For 8 months, I stayed a bit hushed about what we were going through with our family. As a speech pathologist and working in special education and working with children with disabilities of all sorts of medical complexities, I always encouraged families to speak up. But when it came to my turn, it was a little bit harder to do. I can't really recall why. It was just something that I felt like we needed to deal with. It was just something we needed to handle on our own. By the time that we had his diagnosis, I knew that there was no way we could handle this on our own. And so I started posting a little bit more about it on social media. I also looked up and found an article written about a mother going through a current research treatment through a hospital in Texas. And I reached out to her and said, I'm pretty sure that my child has Dravet syndrome too. And she is now one of my people that I just check in with all the time, and we get to see each other at conferences. But she introduced me to our support groups. I knew that I needed to be around other people who understood. And so with that, I connected in our support groups and also got connected with other mothers in our region who had children of relatively the same age and with siblings relatively the same age. So I've been very fortunate to get connected right away with them.
Wow. Thank you both for sharing in a very personal and real way where you were at different times from that sort of that day of infamy that you each remember. I think we will have listeners that will be relating to where you were in that evolution in terms of feeling alone, feeling confused, knowing that you needed to connect, and then now seeing where you are on the back end of that. I think that is going to be an important story for us to capture here for people, and just the sense of belonging that I can hear in your voices that you've gained from creating this comfort zone around each other, just being able to share and support each other, and how that's changed and impacted your family. We'd love to hear more about that. What does that really mean for you and for your families to be connected in that way?
So at this point, I had a little 5-month-old baby, his sister. She and I traveled from Seattle to Miami. I went to the conference because I knew I needed to be around other people who got it. Just being able to go to an event that Dravet Syndrome Foundation put together and to be connected by other parents and be not alone in that, what is going on with these seizures? What is going on with X, Y, and Z of Dravet. It was really important to me then, and I just knew I needed to be more involved with helping get families really connected. In 2017, Dravet Syndrome Foundation initiated the Family Network. Our organization is divided into 5 regions, having parent ambassador volunteers, because we really want families to be able to connect with resources and services that are very close to them. And so I was asked by our executive director, Marianne, would you consider being a volunteer ambassador for the West region? And I said, absolutely. I needed more connections. And this is what I need to better get myself connected with support and to also help other families know that they're not going to feel alone. I was a parent ambassador for many years, and I was asked by our executive director again, would I consider taking on some roles with the foundation, really minimal, just overseeing the Facebook group. And then it turned into, would you oversee our parent ambassadors since you've been one? And here I am today as the Family Network liaison, overseeing those volunteers and then also helping to bring a lot of content to our community, helping to oversee our Day of Dravet in-person workshops, bringing webinars, and then also Tatiana and I have been working on a lot of other little projects just to bring our communities together.
I can kind of piggyback off of Erin's conversation about the moment when you realize you need to find someone else who knows what you're going through. When my daughter was in the hospital after she had over an hour seizure, at that point she was intubated. We did not know what condition she was going to be in once we were able to take her off intubation. They did genetic testing and they sent us home. About 2 weeks after the testing, I got a call from the nurse, and she told me that the doctor wanted to see me immediately, which is never good. I went into the doctor's office, in came the doctor, and in came the social worker. So now I know things are really not about to be good. And they gave me the diagnosis. I asked them, what does this mean long term? Because I don't even know this word that you're telling me. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know. We don't know. There isn't a clear path. There isn't a clear answer. It affects every child differently. So we're just going to have to watch and see how things go. And the social worker grabbed my hand and she said, here is a resource. It was a Google printout of the Dravet Syndrome website. That was the resource. And the first thing I thought was, this is as good as it gets, an internet printout. So when we talk about support, it's literally that. So many things are unknown. Eliana went from temperature changes being a trigger to a point that when she was playing and super, super happy, she would have a seizure. And I sit back and I'm like, there's no way that when she's really happy, that's triggering a seizure, until we tested the theory with our therapist. And that was the issue. If she got too excited, if she played with one specific toy for too long, that was triggering a seizure, her happiness, her excitement. So when you have to look at your child and say they're having a really good time, but I'm going to have to put a pause on this, because if they have too much fun, we're going to have a seizure. That type of control that you have to have over their lives, the way that that affects the siblings, the way you feel as a mom, because we want to see them laughing. We want to see them having a time of their life. But we also know we have to protect them from their own body. There's the caregiver part of it, and then there's the mom guilt that kicks in. And there's the anger. Let's be honest, there's the anger that kicks in on why her? Why us? Where did this come from? Why don't I have answers? And in our support group that the foundation has, and one of the things that I think I'm most proud of is that we have those tough conversations. We support our connections and our friends and our family of coming in one day and saying, I'm angry. Today was a really hard day. The hospital staff came to know and be a part of every holiday and significant event. And they, to this day, are our family. And although I am so blessed to have them, I wish they weren't my family. I wish they didn't know my name. I wish they didn't know my daughter's name. And those are the things that, unless you're walking this path, you wouldn't understand that feeling. And that is why it was so important for us to find each other. A lot of people outside of this journey are going to tell you to stay positive. Don't think negative. Don't think and plan for a seizure today. You have to stay positive. And you can only hear those words so many times until you realize, yes, I am positive, but I'm also realistic on knowing that Dravet comes at any given time. When they're awake, when they're sleeping, when they're bored, when they're excited, it doesn't matter. And that uncontrolled part of Dravet is what I think makes it so difficult to walk this journey. Our emails are always available. We're on social media. Our social media inboxes are always available. The group is always available. Me and Erin have brought what we call Heart to Heart and started recently that once a month, it is a meeting of all the faces and we just talk or vent or complain or share ideas and bounce them off of each other. But there's no judgment. No one's saying you're being too negative. No one's saying you're always talking about the seizures. Enjoy the moment. Stay positive. No, I don't have to love where I am. I am not proud to be a Dravet mom. I'm not proud to be a special needs mom. I accept it. And as a mother, I'm going to do my damnedest to do the best job that I can with the resources that I found. And the resources that I found were with the Dravet Syndrome Foundation.
I think what's really great too, Tatiana mentioned, is we have a support group. We have our online support group. It's actually grown from the time of Leonel's diagnosis with one support group that started in 2010. We have our main international group, and we've grown to 9 different groups. So we have a group for each region. So if you're wanting to connect with families that are closer to you, needing resources in your state, you can connect by region. We have a support group for our caregivers of over 16 years because at that age, things start to change as you're parenting and caregiving for a young adult, whether that's through services with schools, whether we see seizures change due to puberty. But that's another group we have. We know how important some of those live connections are in finding your community. I mean, we certainly need that. It's 2 a.m. There's been a seizure. I can't sleep. I need to go post in the group and see who else is up, who else can join me in this misery. So our support groups are great for that. Tatiana just this June launched a group for our Spanish-speaking families so that we could better communicate and meet the needs of those families in a language that they are more comfortable with. And then sadly, we have a group for our bereaved families. That's another group that we started just last November. But we do have many families who are still very much connected to our community, still active in supporting our mission, but their child has died. And so they're at a loss of where do I fit in? So we wanted to make sure that they had a group where they could connect with each other as well. In January, at a staff meeting, I suggested, I'm just going to open some office hours on Zoom and I'm going to just be working. And if anybody wants to come in and need some support or need some help. And Tatiana said, you know what, I'm going to join you with that. And so that's how we created Heart to Heart. She's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. And it started off as just one session on the last Monday of each month. in the daytime, and then we grew that within a couple of months to add an evening session. And we've had so many families come and connect with each other. It's just comforting to be able to come and say things out loud or not say anything at all. We have plenty of members who come and just their first step to being a part of the community is just to show up. And we make sure everybody knows wherever you need to be, we are here for you with that. Right now, we're preparing for our fall Day of Dravet workshops. And this is a time where we really bring our community together and focus on the caregivers. We present a workshop in each of our 5 regions. And we wanted our Day of Dravet to really be about the community and connection. And so we bring our caregivers together. It just is a really great safe space for our community to come together. And we really try to make sure they're accessible to our families. There really is nothing like meeting somebody in person and just sharing that connection, a connection that you didn't want to have, but are so grateful to be able to have.
It's so beautiful to hear both of you talk about how you're supporting each other and tapping into each other's wisdom and resources. Having people hear your stories about what it's like to actually live with this disease and the complexity of the grief that you were describing, Tatiana, and that it comes in these paradoxical ways, that joy or sadness comes in ways that you don't expect. No one can understand that like each of you together. And just to hear the way you're organically creating the types of supports that you need, like the heart-to-heart just came up organically. And I think, to me, that sounds that you want to have for a community to be vibrant, not just today, but in the future, and to be sustainable. And so it's really great to hear. And I know people who are listening to this will benefit from hearing that.
We absolutely loved being here. And I know if Tatiana was unmuted, she would be saying the same thing.
You read my mind, Erin.
Yes, we do that. We're good for each other like that. It really is. If there's just one thing we could say is find your people. Mm-hmm. It's, we have our community as a whole. Everybody is here for you, but within that, you will find your people. You will find the ones you connect with. Dravet Syndrome Foundation's new tagline is community research progress, and we cannot progress without our community. So we need you, and we are here to support you with those connections.
And we need each other. Thank you. That helps to bridge the loneliness and the effects of this disease.
Anytime we have an opportunity like this just to share our story, it's a great opportunity. Finding a safe place that, as both a mom and a caregiver, I can get the support for my mental and emotional health. Overall, we have to make sure that we're at our best every day. We need the mental support. We need to be able to get things off our chest, ask those difficult questions. And like Erin says, sometimes it's not about interacting. I know for me, I was one of those silent individuals that just read other stories and listened. And I think it's just human nature. You want to feel loved, feel supported, and you want to feel like you belong.
You both have found your voice today, and I think people will listen to that and feel less alone, and it may validate inside them something they maybe didn't even realize they needed. So hopefully they will find you all and become part of your community. I just want to thank you, Tatiana and Erin. Thank you for doing this. We are really honored that you took the time to be with us today to discuss this topic.
Hi, I'm Matt Hartunian, UCB's head of U.S. Advocacy. UCB cares about this topic because we understand that caring for a loved one with a rare epilepsy impacts everyone in the family, and they can't do it alone. They need the help and support of organizations like the Dravet Syndrome Foundation, who provide a critical lifeline to families in need. Finding your people. Finding and connecting to parents, caregivers, brothers, sisters, and others in the community who share your story is important, because the people in your community are the ones who truly understand what you need to navigate this complex journey. We are raring to listen to you, to your stories, and we want you to know we hear you.
This is Kelly Fishbein, and you've been listening to UCB's Raring to Listen podcast. Please join us during November Epilepsy Awareness Month as we bring together families from the LGS community to discuss the importance of self-care.
This podcast has been brought to you by UCB, a global biopharmaceutical company committed to discovering and developing innovative medicines that transform the lives of people living with severe disease. For more information, please visit us at ucb.com.